one of the people I met was a guy called Gordon Mackenzie, who was the creative director of Hallmark Cards, the greetings cards people. And I was asking him this very question that's come up today. Because we as a nation, we're always saying, we're very inventive, but we're not particularly innovative. We come up with all these great ideas, but we don't exploit it. So the question that I was asking everyone was, why? What's the barrier to innovation? And this chap, Gordon, took me to the giraffe pen at San Diego Zoo. I don't know if anybody knows much about giraffes. Anyone here an expert on giraffes? No, good. Well, the thing about giraffes is that they are the world's tallest animal. And believe it or not, they sleep and give birth standing up. And a newborn's typically about 6 feet tall. So Gordon took me to this giraffe pen at San Diego Zoo, and he said, and it's a big pen, and he said, there you go, there's your answer. so I looked, right, okay, I don't understand what you're talking about, Gordon. So he got a chair like this out of the cafeteria, and he stood on the chair. Excuse me while I take my glasses off. He stood on the chair, and he said, right, he said, I want you to imagine, just for a moment, he said, just imagine that you are a giraffe and you're coming into the world for the first time. You're being born into the world. He said, just imagine what happens. So, he said, just think, there you go, you come out into the world 6 feet up. The first thing that you see is a 6-foot drop. And the first thing that happens to you when you fall out is bang, you bang your head on the floor. Oh, okay, well, that's interesting. But what relevance is that to barriers to innovation? Well, he said, what happens in that exercise is that a giraffe becomes scared of heights. Now, if you look at the Alex, you're supposed to be clever. You look at this giraffe pen, what can't you see? And I couldn't find it. He said, you can't see any fences. There are no fences in this giraffe pen. You've got the world's tallest animal with some of the longest legs, and there are no fences keeping it in. What you do have is a very narrow moat that goes all the way round. And the reason for that is that no giraffe will leave the ground because it's conditioned at birth, and we heard some of this sort of stuff earlier on, it's conditioned at birth that height means pain. Now, every single giraffe in the giraffe pen could quite simply and easily jump over the moat, but no giraffe does. So, if you take that to our level as individuals, and think about barriers to innovation. Well, I was born in the 60s. Looking around the audience, probably some of you were also born a bit earlier than that, in the 50s and 40s. Now, when we were born, it was a pretty different world, and our conditioning, our early conditioning, was very different to the world today. For instance, no internet, no mobiles, no broadband, no computers, no Facebook, no Google, no eBay, no SatNav, no iPads, no BlackBerry, no email, no Zip. Completely different conditioning that formed the way that we think when we were born. And the point about that is that unless we are prepared to accept that we are all conditioned, and that we are all conditioned for a world that was yesterday, and therefore accept that the way we instinctively think about a lot of things is probably wrong, then actually adjusting to the fast-changing world around us becomes an impossibility. So my first nugget is this. When you go home, I want you to cut out one thing that you're doing or not doing because of your outdated conditioning. It'll be different for everybody. I want you to think, why am I doing this? I'll give you an example from our business. Very practical example. We did what everybody else did. We sent a product out. When it came back, we then sent a credit to the customer. But we waited for the product to come back. And that was based on some conditioning and assumption. We don't really know what it was. But when we looked at the data, we'd never, ever in our history had anybody not send a product back. So we decided that we would credit people the instant they told us that they were going to send it back. And we've never had a problem since. But what that says to your customer, imagine that. You phone us up. The first thing you're expecting is, they're not going to believe me. The second thing you're thinking is, this is going to be difficult. And so the first thing we say to you is, thank you very much, sorry about that, we've credited your account. And you go, now that sort of thinking, it has a significant impact on the way in which people will think about your business. So when you get back home, I'd like you there'll be thousands of things that you are doing. It's the old adage about, I don't know if you heard the story about the woman that won an award for cooking turkey, and she was interviewed in the press, and she said, I put it all down to my mother, because I chop the end off the turkey and it lets all the juices flow, and it's fantastic. It's a very special way of cooking turkey. And her mother reads the article and says, what you're talking about, the only reason we cut the ends off the turkey was that the oven was too small. There's the sort of things that we believe in that may have been appropriate years and years ago, but certainly aren't appropriate now. So, nugget one, go home and think of that.